Hey everybody, it's Adam with Sports Capitalist, and we are back for football season. I will be doing this video myself, Danger. If you're new to the channel, myself and Danger Nation, we do these NFL videos together. We usually split out the single game slates, one each. Danger wanted to be here for the first week, but he will be celebrating at the game that we're talking about. He is a Rams fan, for anybody that might not know or is new to the channel, so he will be celebrating accordingly. I don't know that the Jets will be there next year, but I will be there if they get to that point. So first of all, thank you for supporting the channel. If you were here with us last year, thank you so much. If you're new, thank you for joining. It's been a great decision for you. We're coming off of a really solid, baseball season. It's had its ups and downs. Baseball's a grind, but really good basketball season as well. Since we've last covered our football here. NASCAR, we've been doing that. I've been doing that in the channel. So just something for everybody. If you're not a member of our Discord already, there's a link in the description below. Be sure to join that. As usual, like, comment, and subscribe. The normal YouTube stuff, that's going to help us get our content out there even further and provide some more information to anybody that's interested in daily fantasy and any sport. We got people doing tennis right now and WNBA. We got something for everybody in the Discord, so be sure to join. And but our bread and butter obviously is football season, and so we have a incredible matchup to start the year. Thursday night football, we have the Buffalo Bills at the Los Angeles Rams. This will be the Rams banner unveiling game after their Super Bowl win. The Bills are 2.5-point road favorites, and we'll cover that here in a little bit. 2.5-point road favorites. A lot of people have the Bills as the favorites to win the Super Bowl this year. The over-under also is 52, so Vegas thinks this game is going to be close and it's going to be high scoring. So jumping into the game, I guess, kind of one of the strategies that I implement is more of a contrarian strategy. And I think that's really helpful, especially in the early weeks, because there's a lot of people out there that are going to have preconceived notions about players or teams heading into the year that are entirely based on what happened last year. And we all know how crazy this offseason was, just with all the player movement, and obviously there's always going to be new head coaches and draft picks and all that kind of stuff. And that opens up a really good opportunity to try and get different in your lineups based on the idea that there's going to be players that might be a little overhyped, whether it's they had a good camp or it's just they were good last year. So, their line of thinking is they're going to be good this year. And there's going to be players like that, but there's also going to be a lot of opportunity for people to, kind of have breakouts, if you will. So not to say that we're only going to pick, the $200 people on DraftKings, but there's going to be some interesting opportunities to get different in these lineups. Now, one thing I do want to point out, and I think is interesting, and I do provide betting picks as well for NFL. In addition to some other people, we have multiple people on NFL, which is good because it's good to get differing opinions. The defending Super Bowl champion in Week 1 over the last 10 years is 7-3 outright. And now, obviously, again, the Rams are playing the Bills, who are a lot of people consider to be the Super Bowl favorites. But, again, the Super Bowl winner, 7-3 in Week 1 outright, and the Rams are slight underdogs here. The Bills have a new offensive coordinator. I know the Rams had a little bit of turnaround too, but they also added some players, and there's going to be one that probably going to be pretty obvious that we're going to talk about, but he's a guy that I really like in this Week 1. So with that, I think what a lot of people are going to end up doing is they're going to lean on the Bills. They're going to see the high total. They're going to see the Bills. They're going to see they're favored. And we all know what Josh Allen can bring to the table, especially with his rushing upside. The rushing upside really wasn't there last year. And so it's not to say that he's lost it or anything. It just seems like he doesn't feel the need to run as much anymore. I think he knows that they're a good enough team that he doesn't have to make these kind of risky plays, because anytime a quarterback runs, it's more risky than they would prefer. So could he run in a touchdown? Sure, absolutely. He's Josh Allen. Certainly one of the favorites for MVP this year. But when we're talking about contrarian strategy, because I like the Rams to, potentially win this game if we're going off of recent history and in Week 1 Super Bowl winners, I think there's a really interesting play to go with Matthew Stafford instead of Josh Allen. Stafford might be less owned, and especially towards the end of last year, he had some turnover problems, so I think that's going to sour some people. The Bills secondary has some question marks in it currently. I believe Tre'Davious White is hurt. So I think there's an opportunity to, because with some of these guys that are so expensive, it's going to be very hard to fit both of these quarterbacks into your lineup. You certainly could in a cash game, and I think you would be able to make a lineup that would get it done in a 50-50. But in these videos, I like to try and go for upside and what's going to help you take down that tournament. So I think there's a really good opportunity to play Matthew Stafford instead of Josh Allen in your lineups and potentially get different there. Again, this isn't to say fade Josh Allen or that Josh Allen's going to have a bad game. Again, Vegas thinks it's going to be close and it's going to be high scoring. But when we're talking about big tournaments and ownership percentages and looking for pivots, I think that's a really good one to not only save you some money. We can see he's cheaper on DraftKings, and I think he's cheaper on FanDuel. We'll look at FanDuel here a little after the DraftKings lineups. But, if they perform relatively the same fantasy points wise and, somebody else or a bunch more people pick Josh Allen and they paid more for him, that's going to open your lineup up for different combinations and potentially tournament winning combinations. So I like Stafford. Do I like him enough to put him in the captain spot? I think it's a way to get different, but not quite. I don't know. I this week I'd rather put a receiver in that captain spot. So we'll get into those guys in a little bit. So that's my takeaway on the quarterbacks. Running backs, on DraftKings here, it's really, at first glance, I like Cam Akers. But I think it's really something to monitor, especially on Twitter or beat reporters, things like that. How healthy is he? How much is there going to be any workload split, or did they, announce any sort of workload split? 8,000 is a pretty tough price to swallow. So I wouldn't try and make it a point to fit him into your lineups. On the other side, Devin Singletary at 7,000 is not interesting to me at all. With a couple other guys in the backfield there. I know towards the end of the year, he kind of more established himself as an RB1, but there's just certain situations that the Bills will get in that they tend to give the ball to Zach Moss. And that's really who I like in terms of the running backs on the slate. He's only $3,000. I still think, even though Singletary kind of established himself more towards the end of the year, that if they're going to get in those short yardage situations or goal line situations, that it's going to be Zach Moss. And at that point, if you're talking about vulturing a touchdown and saving $4,000 while you're at it, Zach Moss is probably my favorite running back play in this game, just based on price and potential opportunity. I also like Darrell Henderson, but again, that's contingent on what we're hearing about Cam Akers. At 4,800, if we're hearing that Cam Akers still maybe isn't quite there to take over the full running back duties. If he's taking over the full running back duties, then it's Cam Akers. He's shown that he is a starting running back in this league in the limited time that we've seen him. Still a young guy, but Darrell Henderson's been a good running back for the Rams. still should get some touches. But again, I think you want a little bit more of that comfort because there's a difference in an established workload split and some touches at 4,800. So again, and James Cook, not terribly interested in at the moment. I think he's certainly somebody to watch throughout the course of the season. But I'm not there with James Cook yet. So Zach Moss, my favorite running back play on this slate. Now, wide receivers, I think, is really where it's going to get interesting for this slate. Obviously, you have to talk about Cooper Kupp. And, Robert Woods is gone, Odell Beckham Jr. They brought in another guy, which we'll talk about in a minute. But overall, I mean, Cooper Kupp, you got to think is going to be at least top 5 in terms of fantasy scoring wide receivers over the course of the year. Now, because of his high price point, it's going to be really tough to put him in at the captain spot. So I think you can get different on the captain spot and still have Cooper Kupp in your lineup to give you some flexibility with your salary. It's just, I played around with it a little bit, and it's just really tough to get Cooper Kupp, one of the quarterbacks, and then try and fill out the rest of your lineup with not punt plays, essentially. So I like Cooper Kupp. I would put him in the flex. And again, with these GPP tournaments, a bunch of people are going to put Cooper Kupp in their captain spot. So that's an opportunity to get different where you can say, well, I'll keep Cooper Kupp in my lineup, but in terms of salary flexibility, I'll gamble on the upside of somebody else to put in that captain spot. And it's another reason why I like Matthew Stafford, because we know if you like Cooper Kupp, then kind of inherently you don't have to like Matthew Stafford because he could turn it over a few times, but somebody's got to be throwing him the ball, right? And Cooper Kupp gets some rushes, but that's just kind of a little further fuel for my Stafford argument. Now the other guy we see a little bit down below, Allen Robinson. This week specifically, I really like Allen Robinson. We talked about the question marks in the Bills secondary. Cooper Kupp's going to get, obviously, a ton of looks his way. I don't know the health status of Van Jefferson. Last I heard, he was maybe banged up, so he's still questionable at the moment. Let's see if there's been any update on him. He didn't practice today, so Allen Robinson, I would go so far as to say you could put in your captain spot because he's a guy that could score at least once, potentially twice. And so I really like, if you're wanting to pivot off of Kupp as a captain, if you're trying to bank on the Rams, then I think Allen Robinson's a great person to put in that captain spot. That's going to offer you a really good amount of salary flexibility rather than putting somebody like Kupp, Allen, or Stafford in that captain spot, because obviously it's going to be more expensive for them. Elsewhere on the Rams side, and we'll kind of keep pass catchers in general. So we'll loop in tight ends. I'm not quite there with Higbee at 5,600. He could score 2 touchdowns. He could have 1 reception. He's very boom or bust. So that's going to be how you feel about it. I like Robinson and Kupp enough that I don't feel like I need to try and squeeze in Tyler Higbee's target share into that lineup. A lot of these other guys aren't really doing much for me in terms of the receivers. Again, Van Jefferson, we're not even sure if he's going to play. And some of these other kind of cheaper receivers, I think I'd rather look on the Buffalo side. So on the Buffalo side, obviously there's Stephon Diggs. I still think I'd rather pay that premium for Kupp, just because of the questions around. It's not to say the Bills hired a bad offensive coordinator, but it's a new offensive coordinator, and so is he going to prefer to try and run it a little more as opposed to running it up like we've seen the Bills do recently? I think he's safe. I just question the upside compared to a Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson, those guys. Gabe Davis is a name that's getting a lot of hype this year, to the point where I mean, we saw that game, I believe it was against the Chiefs, where he just went nuclear. But outside of that, was he really around that? Now he's the wide receiver 2 in this offense. I don't think that's a question. But can you bank on that same sort of performance again, especially for $7,200? And with all the hype around him, I think at that price point and with how much he was talked about in the offseason and coming off of that playoff game, he's a candidate to potentially fade. Because if he has what would otherwise be considered a normal Gabe Davis game, then, and 50% of people have him in his lineup or something like that, I'm just throwing out a number, then, and you don't play him, then you've got a leg up on a ton of lineups. And so if he was cheaper, I'd still be interested in him, but I think I'd rather look elsewhere on the Bills' weapons. Dawson Knox can certainly get it done. So I think that if you're kind of in that price range looking for a spot, I think Dawson Knox is a good pivot option. And even Devin Singletary, I mean, if he's a little cheaper and people have kind of soured on Singletary, I know I kind of trashed on him earlier based on his price point, but that was purely just because of the other running backs available. Those are two guys that I think will probably end up being lower owned. And so I think those provide some interesting opportunities. And Dawson Knox is a guy that isn't quite as touchdown dependent as Higbee is, but the target's got to go somewhere. I think this offensive coordinator we've seen before where he really likes to incorporate the tight end into the offense. So he's more interesting to me than Gabe Davis. One guy that I'm not into is Jamison Crowder. I love Jamison Crowder as a player. He loved him when he was on the Jets. But at the moment, he's still behind Isaiah McKenzie on the depth chart, on the official depth chart. So we don't know how much. So it's not like he's just going to come in and get those Cole Beasley slot targets, right? If he's behind somebody else on the depth chart. So that's where I'll get into this next guy here is Isaiah McKenzie right here. There are some questions around his health, but he was a full participant in practice lately. 2,400. So that offers you a ton of salary relief. He's my favorite cheap play on, well, I guess if you considered Zach Moss a cheap play at 3,000, Isaiah McKenzie would be my second favorite, but he's my favorite cheap pass catcher. I'll put it that way. Picking between the two, I think I'd rather have Zach Moss, but you could fit both of them in, and that's going to offer you a ton of flexibility into your lineup. Sorry about moving the web page there. And so that's going to give you some really interesting opportunities. Lastly, in terms of special teams, the defenses I'm not there with. That would be a really tournament kind of play to pick one of the defenses if you didn't think this game was close. If you thought one of them was going to just absolutely demolish the other one, that's where you would go with the defense. I could see you making the argument for the Bills defense if you still think that Stafford's going to have a few turnovers this game, but with the projected high over-under, at the prices that the defenses are at, I'd almost rather play the kickers. I don't hate the kickers, but I think it's kind of a last resort given some of the other guys that are going to be around there. Zach Moss, Darrell Henderson, Isaiah McKenzie. So not quite there with special teams. If you had to, I would rather play one of the kickers over the defenses and just play the kicker of whoever you think is going to win that game. And so with that, I'll throw around one line up here just to show, and I'm going to put Robinson in the flex just to kind of show the flexibility that you have. So Robinson, we'll go Kupp, Stafford, And then we'll drop down here. We'll grab Zach Moss. Leaves us 7,200 per. And then let's say you also went with Isaiah McKenzie. And then bam, you could. So there you go. There's a lineup right there where you could fit both quarterbacks in without paying that premium at the captain spot. You got Allen Robinson there, and then you can get Kupp, Stafford, Allen, and then your cheap plays would be Moss and McKenzie. If you wanted to do the one quarterback lineup, and put Diggs in there instead, you could go all the way up to Darrell Henderson right here. I don't hate that lineup at all. And of course, if you wanted to fade one of the big guys like Kupp or Stafford, and obviously this lineup doesn't have Josh Allen in it, but you can kind of see the value in putting, not one of those expensive guys in at the captain spot. And again, that's not a throwaway. Your captain should still be a guy that you think could potentially score 1 or 2 touchdowns. And I think Allen Robinson has that upside this week. So that's where I really like him. On the FanDuel side, we'll see if pricing is much different. Yeah, so let's go ahead and put Kupp in our MVP spot there, because it doesn't make a difference on pricing on FanDuel. So this, I think, is too expensive for Akers. I don't like how expensive Robinson is here, or Davis, or Singletary. Goodness. So let's see where some of these cheaper guys are. So McKenzie is at 85. Moss is at 7,000. So that's going to offer you a ton of space. Now you're looking at, you can afford 12,000 per remaining player with Kupp and Moss in your lineup. Let's go Stafford. Let's go Robinson. And then you could go with a kicker, Darrell Henderson, Isaiah McKenzie. I think that's a little pricey for Isaiah McKenzie. Again, I'm not interested in the defense. I'd rather play Tyler Higbee at that price, honestly. So a little bit more flexibility on FanDuel, which tends to be the case because they don't charge up that premium for the captain spot. But put Diggs in there. That tends to be the case with FanDuel. So on FanDuel, I really like Zach Moss then on FanDuel, because you can really do just about anything else with the rest of your lineup. And again, I think that's going to be a good opportunity. I think that'll affect Josh Allen's ownership with how expensive he is on FanDuel. But again, if you kind of want to take the side that the Rams win this game and want to go on a one quarterback strategy, that's where, again, you could go with Stafford and either Robinson or Kupp in the MVP spot, or even Diggs. Diggs could have a good game while Allen has a subpar game price-wise. So I think those are kind of the single game opportunities where you can kind of get different and set those potentially tournament winning lineups. I was close last year. I was really close. I can't remember which game. It was a Ravens game. But that there was like an overtime or game winning touchdown that was thrown. And if it just would have gone to the other person or not happened at all, if they just would have kicked a field goal, then that would have been nice. But we'll get there this year. We just keep following the strategies, and it's sort of the fade the public strategy. So if you've made it this far, thank you for watching the video. Again, like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube video. Who are some guys you like, guys you don't like, people you're thinking about fading this week? We want to hear it. Again, be sure to join the Discord in the link below. Football season's coming up. It's going to be an incredible season. And some other sports coming up. College football just started. Hockey's coming up, but the guy that does hockey for us is phenomenal. So big fan of him. Shout out to Alex. So everybody, thank you for watching. Join the Discord. Good luck this season. Good luck to all your teams. If you're in season-long leagues, I hope your draft went well or does go well if it still has to happen. And we will see y'all on Thursday night. And then I will be back for the Sunday slate countdown, because again, Danger's going to be out celebrating the Rams Super Bowl win. So everybody have a great night, and we will talk to you soon.